Welcome everyone to today's webinar brought to you by Dodge Data and Analytics, the leading provider of data, analytics, news, and intelligence serving the North American construction industry. I'm your host, Dave Donito. As Sales Director at Dodge Data and Analytics, I work closely with building product manufacturers to help them grow and improve their businesses. And as most of you know, having your product included in the architectural specification documents greatly improves your chances of getting in on a project. But this is no easy feat. That's why it's vital to your business to continuously drive product awareness through marketing. In today's webinar, Open the Door to Architects to Drive More Business, I'm going to talk to you about which marketing tactics are most likely to capture the attention of architects and maximize your sales. As many of you know, marketing is an important aspect of any business. Some building product manufacturers question, though, whether marketing to architects bears fruit. The definite answer is yes, and here's how I know. A recent Dodge Data and Analytics construction industry survey of architects and building product manufacturers found that over half, or 53% of manufacturers, think most architects have already selected more than half the products they'll use when they start a project. But according to architects, 55% say they generally pre-selected only 50% or fewer of the products they intended to use. These results show there is a huge opportunity that you might be missing out on if you primarily focused on going after architects only when there is a project of interest. While it's not impossible to get your product introduced after the specification has been written, it's definitely not easy. It's much more effective to get your product known by design pros and specification writers before the specification is developed. So how do you do that? Before you set out to develop your marketing plan, you need to understand who you're marketing to and what drives their decisions. Today's architects have high standards, strict requirements, and complex professional relationships, which makes marketing and selling to them tricky. Whether they're researching a product category or design issue, they all want to be 95% certain your product is a good fit before they speak to your sales rep. So the closer you can get them to the goal, the more confidence they will have in your products, and the easier it will be to get in on that project. The survey I mentioned earlier found that there are still plenty of architects that say they pre-select as much as 50% of the products they intended to use. So how did they choose those products? Architects we surveyed say that almost all the products they pre-select are because they've used them before. It makes sense that time-pressed architects go with what they're familiar with, right? But it doesn't mean they have to. When asked what factors most influence them to use an alternative product over a pre-selected one, an astounding 81% indicate better technical performance as a driving factor. In fact, 36% say it's their number one reason. Now let's talk about the top marketing activities you should be doing to influence architects. So reinventing your website. If you leave this webinar with only one action item, it should be this. Your top marketing priority should be to have a website that is accurate, easy to navigate, and gives architects everything they need to learn about your products. Our survey found that a whopping 96% of architects visit manufacturers' websites to learn about a product or service. But having a website that functions more as a brochure or product catalog is not enough for today's design pros. Here's what they want to find in your website. Technical information. Earlier, I mentioned that architects will use an alternative product if it has better technical performance. This means you need to have plenty of technical information on your website, such as specification sheets, installation information, and any third-party performance data. And make sure your information is in both HTML and PDF formats so it can be easily read online, but also printed or saved to a computer. Images. Tiny thumbnails don't cut it anymore. Let architects zoom in and see detail. If your product is a behind-the-scenes product such as insulation or cables, have diagrams or line drawings created to show how your product works, its composition, or how it's different from the competition. Case studies. Show where your product was successfully used and call out what problem your product helped solve or design goal that was met. Case studies help establish credibility for your product and make it easier for design pros to understand how your product might help them, particularly if your customer faced a similar issue. Also, mentioning your case studies on your website for architectural firms you work with shows your value relationships. Installation information. This is helpful for architects and contractors alike. PDFs are most commonly used, but consider using video, which is exploding in popularity. CAD files make it easy for architects to add your product to their drawings. In lead credits, if your product meets green building requirements, mention it and give details on how to qualify. And finally, product reviews. Our survey found that 89% of architects say reviews are a top driver for considering a product or service. Post product reviews and/or testimonials from architects, contractors, and building owners to your website. Improving your website search performance. When you're trying to locate a new product or have a question about something, how do you find answers? More people, including myself, turn first to search engines, and design pros are no exception. According to a construction industry media consumption survey, almost all architects are using search engines weekly as their primary source to get information about building design, products, or construction. So it should come as no surprise that your website needs to be search engine friendly. Your site's ranking on search engines depends primarily on two factors: relevancy and authority. For relevancy, you want to employ keywords in your site's heading and body copy that your target users are likely to search by. But it's a balance. You don't want to stuff your pages with keywords, as search engines will penalize you for what they perceive as gaming. For authority, if you have good content or interest to the industry, consider including it on other sites. Reach out to webmasters of a few well-trafficked sites and ask them to place a link to your site's content. This placement will increase your site's domain authority and ranking. There are other do's and don'ts to search engine optimization, otherwise known as SEO, that you need to consider. If you don't have someone internally responsible for SEO, you might consider working with an SEO firm to ensure your website achieves the best ranking possible. With new building products being introduced regularly, most architects no longer rely on their in-house catalogs to be complete. As a result, many use third-party building products apps and online catalogs such as Suites.com and ARCAT to conduct building product research. These sites and apps are another valuable marketing tactic for you to showcase your products online. Unfortunately, product research sites vary greatly on quality and quantity of product information. Therefore, it's important you do your research and invest in listing with reputable sites. Once you've gotten listed, you should post the same information you have on your website and ensure you keep it up to date. Another tactic to add to your marketing mix is traditional media. According to the Construction Industry Consumption Media Survey, 71% of architects still favor industry magazines and newsletters to keep up on trends and news related to their profession. While advertisements still have their place, you should strive for more quality exposure in top industry publications. This includes having a press mention about your company or product, a published case study, or product photos. Most publications' websites list staff contact information for submitting press releases or pitching product stories. Another opportunity for exposure among design pros can be created by sponsoring a contest with a top industry publication, such as a photo or drawing contest or raffle. You may also consider hiring a freelance publicist to help you in these efforts. Continuous learning and receiving education credits is critical for architects. Design pros are always interested in learning about new design methods, reviewing other architects' work, and staying abreast of construction industry trends that will influence their projects. Here are some ways you can capitalize on this to market your products. Lunch and learn presentations. When we asked architects to rank the effectiveness of different ways to learn about new products, 66% indicated lunch and learn events as most effective. If you're not familiar with lunch and learns, they are usually 30 minutes to 1 hour presentations that you offer to deliver during lunchtime to a company's relevant staff. The key to a successful session is to focus on a subject rather than your product. Topics of interest include green certification, healthy building design, technical advances in your product category, and aesthetic requirements. Some of you may already know that architects are required to complete a certain number of continuing education units to maintain their licenses. Developing and delivering a course approved by the American Institute of Architects for the Learning Unit designation is another opportunity to create awareness for your product. To get approved by the AIA, your course must be applicable to the architecture industry and benefit or enhance architects' practice, and must be strictly educational in nature. Once your course is approved, you can offer it as a lunch and learn class, part of a local organization's program, or through your website as an online course. For more information on this process, visit AIA.org. White papers, tip sheets, guides, blogs, and ebooks. These are the new marketing tools you can use to gain exposure and build trust among architects. Educational content on your website also helps improve your website's search engine performance. As with other tactics, these content pieces need to focus on helping architects solve a problem, not be sales collateral in disguise. If you can't write this material yourself, consider hiring a freelance writer or marketing agency to develop content. Or you can sponsor an industry study such as a Dodge Smart Market Report or brief. Your sales process is still key. Working hand in hand with your marketing efforts, the sales process is also vital to your business. But as you know, getting a face-to-face meeting with an architect who doesn't know you is tough, but it doesn't have to be. Billable time. Like lawyers and accountants, architects bill for their time. So meeting with you to learn about your product is not billable time, which means it's not likely you're going to have your calls or emails returned. But if you know before you reach out what projects they're working on and see a fit for your product, you improve your chances of getting their attention. Now your meeting request to discuss how your ADA compliant handrails, for example, may be a good fit for their multi-tenant office building project. That's viewed by an architect as billable time. So where to get insight? Even if an architect isn't on a specific project, you can use construction industry data available on a service such as Dodge SpecShare or BuildShare to discover what type of projects an architect typically works on and tailor your message to his or her needs before you pick up the phone. For example, if an architect works on hospital designs and you sell windows and have several hospital installations, this can be your conversation starter. Sell solutions, don't sell products. When you land the meeting with the project architect, how do you ensure that you get the sale? It may be counterintuitive, but the worst thing a salesperson can do is sell. No one likes to be sold to, but everybody needs a solution. The best sales reps use an approach called Consultative Sales. This sales method focuses first on understanding the problem an architect is trying to solve, and then recommending a solution that will specifically address that problem. Simply put, you ask, what are you trying to accomplish and how can I help? For example, let's say you're a tile manufacturer. An architect plans to use brick in his project but knows nothing about mortar. You could offer to bring in mortar samples and provide educational support on what mortar works for different situations. This type of approach builds trust and improves your chances that when tile is needed for a project, this architect will spec your product. So as I mentioned earlier, architects who want to spec your product over a product they've used before have to convince others of their decision. And even then, a contractor who is looking for ways to cut costs will often look for savings in the product list, especially if the contractor is unfamiliar with your product or company. Your chances of getting cut from a project are high, with the owner's blessing, of course. They need to feel confident about your products, too. Therefore, it's important you expand your marketing and sales efforts to include contractors and project owners. Contractors and project owners can sometimes be tougher customers than architects, so your marketing and sales approach may need to address issues up front. For example, if your product is more expensive than others, you need to communicate why. If you sell air conditioning systems that are the most expensive on the market, but offer energy efficiency aspects that provide a higher ROI, this needs to be clearly explained and backed up if possible with data from existing installs. There are also instances when the architect has specified your product, but it's a higher quality than what's needed. If you've built a relationship with the contractor, you have a better chance of being contacted about scope changes and budget cuts and given the opportunity to offer a replacement that better meets the needs of the project or budget. If a contractor seems reluctant to work with you, you can remind them that swapping out a product from one manufacturer to another can result in design changes which cost money. It can be more cost-effective for them to work with you to find a substitute that won't require a redesign. During today's presentation, I've made reference to various tools and information sources offered by Dodge Data and Analytics to help manufacturers grow their business. To learn more about these resources, feel free to visit our website at construction.com or call the 800 number listed on the screen. Thank you. With the information you've gained today on best marketing tactics and sales approach to get your product known early among architects, you're on your way to dramatically increasing your chances of getting your product selected and winning more business. Before we begin the Q&A session, I want to mention we have an insider's guide available called Open the Door to Architects to Win More Business. This guide includes much of what I've shared today on marketing to architects and would be a helpful reference tool for you as you embark on improving your own marketing strategy. You can download this guide from construction.com. Now we'll begin the Q&A session. Okay, we've got a few questions here from the audience. I was going to go through and select them through. Certainly, if there's others that want to add in, you can use the tool in front of you to submit a question. One of the first questions we have here is a question about content in Dodge Data and Analytics Services. So the question is, do you also cover civil engineers? And the short answer to that is yes. Dodge Data and Analytics Project News Service attempts to capture all of what we would call, quote unquote, the relevant players on a construction project, and that typically in the early stages is obviously an owner of the property or a business somebody that's doing property development. And as we move through the life cycle of capturing that project information, we'll also pick up certainly the architect or design professionals that are been assigned or awarded the job from the owner, general contractors and any contractors or engineers or subs that may have been associated with the project that we captured during that news gathering process. Oftentimes, civil engineers do comprise those quote-unquote players or firms associated with the project. So the short answer is yes, there are other players associated with construction projects that we capture on that detail as well. Just check for a few more questions. Administratively, there's a couple questions here about receiving a copy of this presentation, and I think we just covered that there. There's the Insider's Guide available at construction.com, so you can get that there. And also, this session's been recorded, and on the original link that you all signed into, you can rerun the presentation through that. That'll be recorded and available for you to reference later on as well. Here's another question in here. We had touched on this a little bit earlier, but maybe we weren't clear enough here. What are some of the more popular online product listing sites? So, of course, Dodge offers suites.com, and there are other services where there's product listings such as RCAT. So those are two of the bigger names. Excuse me, Suites and RCAT are two of the bigger names of product listing sites. Let's look through a few more questions here. There's a question here related to what is the best way to approach K through 12 versus commercial prospects. You know, from the perspective of our customers that use our data, I can speak to that. It's all dependent on sort of the profile of the work. So, if the prospect here in terms is the architect, we have tools that allow you to review historical sort of not only specification habits but also work profile habits. So we have tools, we referenced them earlier, SpecShare and BuildShare allow you to take a look at architectural firms or key specifiers over a 3 to 4 year period and evaluate what types of projects they work on. So Are they heavily leveraged towards working on K through 12 versus traditional commercial projects like retail or commercial warehouse or hotel motel types of projects and hospital projects for that matter? You can actually glean over a historical period how often they work on those types of projects and actually drill down specifically into the individual projects and their plans and specifications to see what types of products they use. So one of the ways that our customers use this data is to identify top lists of specifiers, or your prospects in this case, look at the profile of work they've had, and then look under the covers and look deeply into the specific projects that they've used, and even keying in on the types of products and or manufacturers or maybe even your competitors that they specified on those types of projects. So lots of tools out there. Obviously, we have our own. There's other folks out there that collect information similar to this, and you can research the web or you can reach out to us as well, and we'd be happy to give you more detail on that. In fact, if anyone has any questions that they would like to email me directly, I'll give you my email address here, and you can send those questions to me directly if we haven't had a chance to cover them here in today's session. So my email address is my first name, David, dot my last name, Dinito, D-I-N-I-T-T-O, @construction.com. I'll spell it for you again. It's David.Dinito, D-I-N-I-T-T-O, @construction.com. So if we don't give a chance to cover your question here, feel free to email me directly, or if I haven't been able to answer your question satisfactorily, you can send it to me and I'll research it further for you. Just checking for more questions here that are coming through. Yeah, there's a lot of questions here about social media here. How are architects using social media? How is social media being used? Instagram, LinkedIn, and so forth. We found that quite a few architects do promote, and contractors for that matter, promote the projects that they've worked on, similar to the way that you might promote your products that were used in a good example of a project, a flagship project that you might have worked on and your product was installed on to promote it. We find that architects and contractors that we run across are also doing the same thing, using things like LinkedIn. Twitter is becoming sort of I think a more commonplace application for promoting projects that architects and contractors have worked on. So those are some of the other tools that we've seen architects and contractors use to promote their business and how successfully they've built and developed projects. So there's a question here that I can't necessarily answer. I'll repeat it here, and maybe I can research this one for the folks that put it up here. But is there specific certifications or building code approvals that are a must before an architect will even look at or specify the product? Well, I would certainly say sort of the Construction Specification Institute format. At a minimum, if you have a CSI 3-part spec for your product, that's a starting point. I don't know if there's any legal implications or qualifications or certifications that the product must meet. I guess it would depend on your category, but at a minimum, we typically recommend if a customer of ours that's a building product manufacturer doesn't have a quote-unquote 3-part spec that's in the CSI master format for that matter, they should probably get one and make sure that architects have that in their library of tools to use when they're working on projects. In fact, there's a lot of tools out there, some of the tools I referenced, which give us the ability to help you understand at which rate these architects are specifying your product. And the way we typically do that is through search logic across that CSI master format. So that's really important to ensure that you have that. And in recent years, also BIM or AutoCAD content. So having that content developed, so architects, if they're using AutoCAD Revit, for example, Autodesk Revit or AutoCAD, they can quickly use your BIM models or BIM objects or AutoCAD objects directly into their electronic models. So those are other good tools for folks to use. There's a really good question here. Does Dodge have any tools to help learn who are likely bidders on a project? So we do, actually. We have some tools that capture the folks that have been the low bidders and then also the likely bidders, or the folks who are, quote-unquote, the plan holders of record. So what's interesting about that is you can look at over time which types of firms are holding plans, contractors, for example, by trade, who are holding plans on certain types of projects, be they commercial, K through 12, hospitality, as we mentioned earlier. And so that does show the likelihood that they'll bid. We don't necessarily know that they've been awarded the job, but at that point we know that there's active projects out there with plans and specifications that these folks have acquired and make them very likely candidates to bid on the job. Just looking through some more questions. Oh, there's a question here about some of the sites I referenced. It's Sweets.com, SWEETS.com is the site that I referenced earlier, which is one of the Dodge brands for product listing. I guess I wasn't clear there on it. Sweets.com, SWEETS.com. The question here about any thoughts on effectiveness of Google display AdWords retargeting campaigns for reaching architects and designers. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer on that. I would probably recommend if you could follow up with me, I can put you in contact with some of our architectural specialty folks here that may have a sense for how we could answer that question for you and give you a more specific question about more specific answer about how we should answer that question. But I think it's a good question. I just don't know enough about how the Google display AdWords or help, and I assume that's related to sales engine optimization. Here's another question here related to if your parts are already specified on a job, but a cheaper equivalent was chosen, should you approach the architect or the project contractor? So, see, I guess it depends on the job. This could be job by job specific, but feedback from our customers, our manufacturer customers, are that if they've lost out in terms of a cheaper equivalent, oftentimes the decision was made by the local project contractor and not the architect. Oftentimes the architect has to approve that substitution, but I think the driver of that typically is the contractor, from my experience, and it could be. Hey, it could be based on price. It could be on other things, though. We've found, like availability of the product to the job site, how the contractor's experience has been with getting orders delivered to the job site for one manufacturer versus another, or simply something like ease of use or ease of installation of that product over another product. So while it may seem like a cheaper equivalent was used and that was purely a price-based decision, it may be other reasons. And that oftentimes is being left up to the project contractor and even the subcontractor that's specific for that trade that your product is relevant to. So that's an excellent question and one that comes up quite often. And there's that fine balance of, do we market, as we talked about earlier, spend a lot of our time marketing to the architect, or do we spend more time working sort of tactically with the contractors that are working on the jobs? And I think the answer is yes to both. It's just that balance of how much time do you spend up front versus at the back end after the spec's written. And I think our customers that use tools like this and market effectively and have good, successful sales teams are running a fine balance or a good balance of both. They know that to be in front of the architects to make sure that they're written into the specification before it gets too late is very important, but they also have to have that tactical approach directly on the ground, on the job site with the contractor, educating them about the tool or the product in question and how it's superior, let's say, to the competition. There's a good question here. What % of design firms are using BIM? How important is it to have BIM files versus just CAD files available to your product? I don't know the stats on BIM. We do have a study, though, that's posted up on our site. I should know that off the top of my head, and I'm sorry I don't. But if you check out construction.com, there is a study there, I believe, that we had done on BIM. It was one of our smart market reports. And it talks about the growing trends over the last few years of architects using BIM. In BIM and AutoCAD. We touched on this earlier in the year, and I remember hearing a number of something like up to 200,000 architects have fully embraced using BIM files. But there's a much larger population because of the advent of how BIM is slightly younger, obviously, than AutoCAD. AutoCAD has millions of users versus hundreds of thousands, let's say, of users on BIM objects and BIM files. But I think what we're seeing is that the BIM files are growing. The requirements of having BIM on a project for a project architect are growing in the most recent years, and I would say expecting to maybe even grow exponentially in the coming years. So we see a lot of our customers wanting to have content developed for BIM. We often help them with that as well. So check out construction.com. If I find it, I can highlight that Smart Market report that was focused on BIM that we published, and you can also research it that way. And I'll also try to get a direct answer back because I have a list of the folks who are asking the questions. Very good question, though, and it's certainly a growing aspect of the market here, and building product manufacturers have it high on their radar. Question about copies of this presentation in PowerPoint. Not sure the format. I believe it is in PowerPoint, but certainly make it available, and it's available for download here from our website, from the link you originally registered in. Another question here related to, so does Dodge post detailed architectural specifications for projects? And the answer to that is yes. The more detailed answer is we capture upwards of 60 to 70,000 projects that go out to bid or negotiate on a calendar year basis. I would say 40 to 50,000 of those are general building construction, with the balance being sort of engineering. Kind of begs the question earlier about, do we capture civil engineers? And we absolutely do. We capture plans and specs on all types of construction, commercial, institutional, and also engineering type projects, as well as multifamily apartments. So yes, we capture the plans and specifications. So we have the drawings as well as schematic plans. Okay. I think that's all the time we have now, folks. We've got quite a few questions in here, and I appreciate all the feedback, and hopefully this presentation was useful to you and helpful. I want to thank you again for joining us today, and just remind you to visit construction.com. I think a lot of questions and sort of valuable resources could be answered there. And as I mentioned, you can feel free to reach out to me directly if I did not get to your question. I'd be happy to follow up with you later and research it if I didn't have a satisfactory answer for you. So again, my email address, david.dinitto, D-I-N-I-T-T-O, @construction.com. And thanks again for attending this webinar. I appreciate it.